What's the scariest true story you've heard or told? I've told this story before. I'm an eye doctor, and I had a patient come to me with an infected eyelid. 2 other eye doctors tried to treat and failed. They were dumping all sorts of medicine into it, and it wasn't getting any better. At this point, it was swollen and painful for weeks with no improvement, despite being on tons of meds. Apparently, neither of them thought to flip the lid upside down. You know that gross trick some kids do with their upper eyelids? It was a painful maneuver for her very swollen eyelid, which might explain it. Anyhow, there appeared to be what looked like a visible abscess inside the tissue with thick, gooey material. I thought I'd give it a nudge and saw it move. This wasn't an abscess. It was something else. I managed to remove it quite easily in one whole piece. It was a fly larva. The patient told me that she had a bug hit her in the eye a few days before she got this infection. I removed the larva, and within 2 days the wound closed and she was 100% recovered on basic antibiotic eye drops. Yes, I do have the photos from this case for those interested. TLDR. Patient had a bug lay an egg in her eyelid, and I removed the larva. My HIV story. I was on a trip on my first commercial flight from Sacramento to San Diego to visit my girlfriend, and I didn't feel well. Once I got off the plane, I made it to the hotel and had bouts of nausea and diarrhea for a few days straight and finally decided to go to hospital. After waiting hours, I was led into a room, and sometime later, an Asian woman wearing a mask and gloves entered. "Please leave the room," she told my girlfriend. Let's call Beatrice. "No, she can stay. It's okay," I said. The doctor still hadn't looked at me but looked back to Beatrice. "I think you should leave." I looked to Beatrice and said, "Can you please wait outside?" Right as the door closed, the doctor said, "You have HIV." My mind instantly started racing, trying to problem solve. "I can't have AIDS. I got tested before being with Beatrice and I was clean," I said. The doctor again, "You have HIV," while avoiding eye contact. I looked at my palms, and for the first time in my life they were sweating, really sweating. I said again, "I can't. I've been tested." The doctor flipped a page and asked my name, which I responded, and finally the doctor's eyes made contact with my own. "I'm so sorry. I have the wrong chart. You have strep throat and laryngitis." I remember the world ending and then the feeling, the most relief I've ever experienced in my life. When I told Beatrice the whole story, she awkwardly laughed and said, "But you don't have AIDS, right?" To this day, when I tell people what happened, a good portion say, "But you don't have AIDS, right?" Whole lot of fucking nope. I had brain surgery roughly 3 years ago. I lost my concept of time. What felt like 4 months was only 3 days. The MOT of physical, mental, and emotional pain I went through was crazy. I had to find all of my memories and relearn how to walk, talk, everything. If you want to go through something terrifying, that is it. This happened with my sister-in-law when she was about 11 or 12. Her and her family lived in a trailer park Just down the street was her bus stop for school. Each morning, she would see a man in his trailer taking pictures of her and her friends. It creeped her out, so she went to tell her mom, my mother-in-law, of what this guy was doing and how he would just stand in the window staring at them and taking pictures. So her mom calls the police and report him. The police didn't do anything. This went on for about another 2 weeks with no action from the police, to where now my sister-in-law is terrified to stand and wait for the school bus, and her mom had to call the police again. This time the police actually arrived at this pervert's house, and lo and behold, the police find a wall covered in pictures of my sister-in-law, some of the other neighborhood little girls, and some child porn. Her and the other families watched from afar, with this guy cuffed up and being escorted to the police cruiser. The story of John Edward Jones getting stuck in Nutty Putty Cave in Utah. He became wedged in the tight crawl when he took a wrong turn in the cave system. Rescuers could do nothing to get him out, and he was stuck in there for 28 hours before he died from cardiac arrest, because feet were above his head and his heart was pumping over time. One of the rescuers even gave him a phone to call his wife and talk to his young daughter before he died. Off the main road of a place I used to work at, a guy decided to climb under a bus to hitch a free ride. Well, the bus went over a speed bump, and the guy fell and ended up getting caught on the back wheel. His body was dragged 5 blocks before the bus driver realized what was happening. A police officer who came into our store regularly told us that the guy was still alive when they got to him, but died an hour later. He said his whole back was scraped off, exposing his spine. I remember driving down that road after the fact, and you could still see a deep red blood-stained trail going on for those 5 blocks. Absolutely horrifying. One of our employees fell into the hammer box. This is a device filled with ultra-high torque rotating hammers used to grind up large appliances into scrap metal. It apparently turned 3 times before the emergency shutoff was hit, pulling in half the employee's body at a diagonal, running from the middle of his pelvis to his shoulder. The gruesome part was that he was still alive, as the pressure from the hammers was holding the enormous wound shut. Took 30 minutes for EMTs to arrive while he screamed for them to simply turn the machine back on and end it. He didn't make it. This thread is probably dead now. But when I was about 4 and my brother 11, we stayed at my aunt's between moving house. Her neighbor had a son my brother's age, so my bro used to go play with him on weekends, etc. One day my brother goes over after lunch. The dad opens the door, says the kids and mom are out shopping, but come on in and have some juice and tell them about how the move is going. My bro goes in, has a drink and a chat, then comes back to my aunt's after no more than an hour. A few days later, police are all over the place. Turns out the dad murdered his wife and kids and was in the middle of burying them in the back garden around the time my brother knocked. Crazy to think what could be different if my brother had visited a couple of hours before or caught that guy on an off day. When I was a kid, we lived on a large acreage. One night we came home late, and as we entered the driveway, we noticed a car pulled over down the road against the ditch that bordered our property. We saw two people, one of them climbing out of the ditch. When we parked, my mom told my dad to go see if they were okay or needed help. My dad said that they looked to be okay, and it was probably not a good idea, so we all went in and to bed. The next morning we were woken up by the police. They had our whole yard taped off because some horseback riders had noticed a leg sticking out of a black plastic bag in the ditch exactly where that car was parked. That look on my mom's face I'll never forget. We know for sure my dad wouldn't have made it back home alive if he had listened to my mom that night. I'm a crime writer and once interviewed a woman who told me an unrelated horror story about something that happened to her as a girl. When she was like 10, she had trouble sleeping and imagined the boogeyman was living in her closet, staring at her during the night. Every night she would come down and tell her parents, and every night her father would tell her the boogeyman didn't exist and she should go back to bed. Well, this happened for several nights, and the father got tired of it. So that night he walked her back to her bedroom, turned on the light, and said, "I'll show you there's no boogeyman," and went to open the closet door. But something on the other side held it shut. He sent his daughter out of the room and forced the door open to find that a man was inside. He'd been sneaking into their house every night to stand in the girl's closet and watch her, and maybe more. He'd beat the ever-loving shit out of the man, and the man went to prison. When I interviewed this woman, I looked him up online. He'd recently gotten out on parole and had skipped out on his weekly checks. There was a warrant out for his arrest, and nobody knew where he was anymore. If this story sent chills down your spine, subscribe, leave a like, and share it with someone who shouldn't be alone tonight.